It was a busy afternoon in Beverly Hills, California, where window displays glittered with diamonds and jewelry that cost small fortunes. In the heart of the city, Lavelle Jewelry was one of the most prestigious establishments, frequented by high-end customers such as artists, businessmen, and socialites. On that day, as vendors set expensive necklaces and wealthy customers were served glasses of champagne, an elderly, humble-looking man walked through the front door. His name was Henry Wallace, a retired gardener from Sacramento, who had taken a bus to Beverly Hills to visit the jewelry store. Henry wore shabby work pants, worn boots, and a faded long-sleeved shirt. His face was scarred by time, his calloused hands betrayed years of work in the fields, and an old cap covered his gray hair. As soon as he walked through the door, silence took over a group of employees. Liam Carter, one of the store's most experienced salespeople, frowned and looked at his colleagues with a wry smile. "What is this fellow doing here?" he whispered to Tiffany, another saleswoman. Tiffany laughed discreetly and whispered, "You're probably lost." Or he came to ask for information about a gardening job. Customers, accustomed to a sophisticated environment, also cast suspicious glances at Henry, who, unaware of the reactions around him, walked towards one of the store's most refined windows. He stood before a necklace of blue sapphires and white gold, admiring the jewel with a twinkle in his eye. The tension increased when Ethan Monroe, the store manager, noticed the presence of the elderly man. With firm steps and a forced smile, Ethan approached Henry. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I help you with?" he asked in a visibly impatient tone. Henry, with a sincere smile, pointed to the necklace. "Good afternoon. This necklace is beautiful. How much does it cost?" Ethan didn't hide his surprise. He glanced at the other employees who were now watching the scene, waiting to see how far it would go. "That necklace costs $50,000, sir," the manager replied, folding his arms. "Can I suggest something more affordable for your budget?" Henry blinked a few times, a little surprised by the harsh attitude, but kept calm. "I was wondering if I can buy it." Liam, who was watching the scene, let out a suppressed laugh. "Sir, with all due respect, this jewelry store works with exclusive pieces. I believe that this necklace is not exactly for your type of customer." Henry felt the weight of those words, but he didn't react angrily. He just looked back at the necklace, touching his shirt pocket where he kept a neatly folded envelope. The money he had saved for years was there, the result of hard work and dedication. But before he could say anything, Ethan Monroe stepped forward and spoke definitively. "Sir, if you are not going to buy anything, I ask you to leave. We are serving customers who can really afford it." Henry took a deep breath. He looked around and realized that everyone was waiting for him to be embarrassed and leave. The old man sighed, nodded politely, and turned to leave, saying no more. The low laughter of some employees echoed as he slowly walked to the door. But at that moment, a young salesman named Noah Evans, who was watching the scene with a lump in his throat, decided to take action. He got out from behind the counter and followed Henry to the sidewalk. "Sir, wait!" Noah called, running after him. Henry stopped and turned, staring at the young man with gentle eyes. And that's how a small gesture of empathy began to change the course of that story. Henry Wallace, the old gardener from Sacramento, kept looking at the blue and white gold sapphire necklace on display in the main window of Lavelle Jewelry in the heart of Beverly Hills, California. His eyes shone with admiration, but to the store employees he was just an inconvenient intruder. The sophisticated environment of the jewelry store, where champagne was served in crystal glasses and customers signed checks for thousands of dollars, without batting an eyelid, seemed like a completely opposite universe to that of the elderly man in simple clothes and calloused hands. Not noticing the disdainful looks around him, Henry pointed to the necklace and, in a gentle voice, asked the nearest vendor, "This necklace is really beautiful. How much does it cost?" The clerk next to the counter, Liam Carter, a young, arrogant man accustomed to dealing only with the city's elite, raised an eyebrow and looked the elderly man up and down, assessing his appearance. "That necklace? he asked with a mocking smile. "Sir, this necklace costs $50,000. That is, more than you probably earn in an entire year." The phrase was said in a tone loud enough for other employees and customers to hear. A suppressed laugh began to spread among those present, and a woman dressed in haute couture whispered something to her friend, who also laughed discreetly. Henry blinked a few times, surprised by the answer. He didn't expect to be treated with luxury, but he also didn't imagine being ridiculed like that. Even so, he did not let his expression change. Calmly, he looked at Liam and said, "I'd like to buy it." The answer made the muffled laughter of the employees more evident. Tiffany Williams, a blonde saleswoman and always concerned about her image, put her hand to her mouth to hold back a laugh. "Buy it?" Liam repeated, crossing his arms. "With all due respect, sir, but this necklace is not for everyone. Maybe you would like to look at some piece of our more accessible." The humiliation did not stop there. Ethan Monroe, the store manager, who had been watching the scene from afar, decided to intervene. He was a tall man in an impeccable suit and cold gaze, and he realized that Henry's presence was beginning to cause discomfort in wealthy customers. With a forced smile, he walked over and placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, as if about to give some friendly advice. "Sir," Ethan began in a polite but condescending tone, "I understand that you may have been confused. This jewelry store serves a very specific audience, you know? Maybe there's another store more appropriate to what you are looking for." The intention was clear. They wanted Henry to get out of there immediately. The old gardener pressed his lips together and took a deep breath. He felt the judgmental gazes fixed on him as if they were daggers. For a brief moment, he thought about taking the envelope out of his pocket and showing that he had saved for years for that gift. But then he looked around and realized something. No matter how much money he had, these people had already decided who he was just by his looks. Henry then nodded slowly and said calmly, "I see." Without saying anything else, he turned and began to walk towards the door. The silence in the hall was quickly replaced by whispers and more low laughter. For those employees, the situation was funny. For elitist customers, it was just a passing nuisance. But for Noah Evans, the young salesman who was watching all this without being able to laugh along with his colleagues, it was something that bothered him deeply. He saw something different in Henry's eyes. Not anger, not despair, but a quiet dignity. When the door of the jewelry store closed behind the old gardener, Noah felt a weight in his chest, and then, without thinking too much, he decided to act. "Sir, wait," he called, quickly walking out the door. Henry paused and looked back, meeting the only friendly look from that cold afternoon in Beverly Hills. As the glass door of Lavelle Jewelry in Beverly Hills, Calif, closed behind Henry Wallace, the whispers and laughter inside the store still echoed. To employees and customers, this moment was nothing more than a forgettable anecdote. An old gardener trying to buy something he clearly couldn't afford. However, Noah Evans, a young salesman who had started working at the jewelry store a few months earlier, couldn't laugh along with his colleagues. He had seen something in Henry's eyes, a glint that didn't match the mockery the others were making. As his colleagues returned to work, Noah stood still for a few moments, feeling a lump in his chest. He then made a decision. Ignoring the confused looks of the other salesmen, he quickly took out his badge, opened the door of the store, and ran after the old man. "Sir, wait!" he called, trying to reach him before it was too late. Henry, who was already walking slowly along the sidewalk, stopped and turned around with a surprised look. It was the first time that someone there spoke to him in a kind way. Noah took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm sorry for what happened inside." The old man gave a small smile, but his eyes carried an evident sadness. "Don't worry, boy. I'm used to being treated like this." Noah felt a pinch in his heart. How could anyone just accept that kind of humiliation? "Can I ask you something? Why did you want to buy that necklace?" Henry looked at the young man for a moment, pondering whether he should tell his story. But there was something in Noah's eyes that made him feel like he really wanted to hear. He then sighed and began to count. I've been a gardener for more than 40 years. I worked in many houses, I took care of many gardens, but I never had much money. I always lived simply, and everything I earned was for my family. Noah listened, attentively without interrupting. I have a granddaughter, Emily. Since she was little, she has always been a very hard-working girl. He studied on a scholarship and is now graduating from university. I promised her many years ago that on graduation day, I would buy her a special gift, something she could keep forever. That necklace was perfect for her. The old man smiled slightly but soon lowered his eyes. I saved penny by penny for years, cutting expenses, doing extra work, all to fulfill that promise. But now I realize that it was not enough. The price has increased and I don't have enough money to buy it. Noah felt a shiver run down his spine. While everyone inside the jewelry store had laughed at that gentleman, he was there for a noble reason full of love. He thought of all the expensive jewelry he sold daily, often to customers who bought it without even thinking about the value, just for ostentation. And now, before him, stood a man who had a true purpose for that gift, but was not seen as worthy enough just because of his looks. Henry sighed again and patted Noah lightly on the shoulder. Thank you for coming here, boy. But don't worry, I'll find something else to give Emily. He then turned to continue on his way. But before he could take a few more steps, Noah felt a boost inside him. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't let that gentleman leave empty-handed. The gentle afternoon wind blew through the streets of Beverly Hills as Henry Wallace and Noah Evans walked slowly next to the jewelry store. To anyone who passed by, they seemed just like a young man and an old man chatting casually. But to Noah, every word from the old gardener was a reminder of how unfair the world could be. Henry took a deep breath and continued his story as he looked at the sidewalk as if he saw the past before him. I've worked my whole life taking care of gardens. I've always loved my job, seeing the flowers grow, the trees bear fruit. But I was never a rich man. My wife and I have always lived simply, without luxury, but with a lot of love. Noah listened, attentively, realizing that this gentleman spoke with pride and affection about his life, even with the difficulties. When my granddaughter Emily was born, my wife and I promised that we would do everything we could to help her have a better future. And she tried very hard. She has always been at the top of her class, got scholarships, and is now about to graduate from college. Henry smiled slightly, but his eyes carried a discreet melancholy. The day she passed the university, I made a promise. I would give her a special gift on graduation day, something that would show how precious she is to. Since then, I started saving. Every dollar left over from my yard work, every tip I received, I saved. Sometimes I did extra work at night, taking care of plants in the homes of people who didn't even notice me. Noah swallowed. He worked in many stores before Lavelle Jewelry, and he was well acquainted with the kind of people who hired employees like Henry without even asking their names. For years, my wife and I gathered the money slowly, always counting the days. But, like everything in life, prices have gone up: food, rent, medicine. And now, when the time has finally come to deliver on my promise, I realize that I still don't have enough to buy the gift that Emily deserves. Henry took out of his shirt pocket a small, battered envelope, carefully folded. He opened it and showed Noah some carefully guarded notes. That's all I have. Noah looked at the money and felt a tightness in his chest. He had seen customers walk into the jewelry store and spend that amount on a single bottle of champagne, just to celebrate a purchase. But for Henry, that money represented years of effort, dedication, and love for his granddaughter. The young salesman closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. He wanted to do something to help, but he also knew he couldn't just give the necklace away for free. Mr. Henry, I really admire everything you've done for your granddaughter. And honestly, I wish I could just hand the necklace to you, but I don't have that power. The store belongs to someone else, and they don't allow that kind of thing. What I can do is try to find a solution. The old man nodded slowly, understanding. The young man's position, I imagined. Nothing in life comes easy, does it? Noah was silent for a few seconds. Her mind worked quickly, looking for a way to help that man without breaking the rules of the store. Then, all of a sudden, he had an idea. If he couldn't give the necklace away for free, maybe there was another way to make sure Henry could buy the gift he dreamed of for his granddaughter. And at that moment, Noah decided that he would do the impossible to get Henry to leave that town. With the necklace in hand, Noah Evans paced back and forth in the small warehouse of LUXURY Jewellery in Beverly Hills, California, trying to think of a way to help Henry Wallace. After hearing the old gardener's story and his promise to his granddaughter, he knew he couldn't just let him leave empty-handed. But what could he do? The blue sapphires and white gold necklace cost $50,000, and Henry, despite years of saving, still didn't have enough money. Noah returned to the jewelry salon and observed his colleagues serving millionaire customers, selling jewelry as if it were candy. He knew that for the company, giving a considerable discount was almost impossible. It was then that he had an idea. Noah knew that Lavelle bought many of its parts from direct suppliers, and that on some occasions, negotiations could be made in special situations. He went to manager Ethan Monroe's office, but he knew he couldn't tell the truth about Henry. Ethan would never approve of helping a client who didn't seem to have any money. Instead, he said that a prospective buyer was very interested in the necklace, but that the price was a little above what he could afford. If we can get a discount from the supplier, we can close the sale quickly, Noah argued. Ethan, always interested in closing deals quickly, thought for a moment and agreed to give it a try. After a few calls, the supplier accepted a small 20% discount on the value of the piece, which already reduced $10,000 from the total price. It was still a lot of money, but it was already a great advance. Noah felt an initial relief, but it still wasn't enough. Henry still needed more money to complete the remaining amount. Noah went back to his small office and opened his bank statement on his phone. He wasn't rich. He lived in a simple apartment and still paid his car installments. But he knew he could give up some things to do something bigger than himself. He did a quick calculation and decided he would donate part of his own salary to cover the difference Henry still needed. He took a deep breath and smiled. He knew that what he was doing was right. Hours later, Henry was sitting on a small bench in the plaza next to the jewelry store, waiting for Noah to return. When the young man appeared, carrying a small blue velvet case, the old gardener stood up quickly, his eyes wide. "Noah, what's that?" he asked, confused. Noah opened the box, revealing the blue sapphires and white gold necklace Henry had so desired. "Here it is, Mr. Henry. Now this necklace is yours." The old man widened his eyes, unable to believe what he was seeing. He looked at Noah, then at the jewel, and then again at Noah. "But how? I didn't have enough money?" Noah smiled. "I got a discount from the supplier and, well, I covered the rest with part of my salary. I didn't want your granddaughter to be without this special gift." Henry's eyes filled with tears. For a moment he couldn't say anything. He just stared at Noah with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and excitement. He then held the young salesman's hand tightly and shook his head. "My boy, I don't know how to thank you. That's a bigger gift than I could have imagined. I'll never forget what you did for me and Emily." Noah smiled and patted Henry lightly on the shoulder. "You have already done a lot for your granddaughter. I only did my part to help a man who kept his promise to the end." Henry, with trembling hands, picked up the box with the necklace and held it to his chest. He had kept his promise, and Noah knew in that moment that he had made the right choice. The sun was shining high in Beverly Hills, California, when the glass doors of LUXURY Jewellery opened once again. This time, however, it was not a humble old gardener in worn clothes who entered. Henry Wallace had returned, but now his appearance was completely different. Wearing an impeccable gray suit, polished leather shoes, and an understated luxury watch, he walked steadily and confidently through the jewelry hall. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his beard, once a little disheveled, was neatly trimmed. The same dignity he had shown on his first visit was now accompanied by something instant respect. The employees who had previously laughed and despised him now looked at him in a completely different way. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" Liam Carter asked, the same salesman who, days before, had mocked him. Now his tone was professional and polite, with a slight touch of flattery. "Welcome to Lavelle Jewelry, sir," Tiffany Williams said, smiling as she smoothed her own uniform. No one there recognized him. The only exception was Noah Evans, the young salesman who had helped Henry get the necklace for his granddaughter. Noah was at the back of the store, arranging some pieces when he looked up and widened them in surprise. He recognized Henry at once, but was confused to see him so elegant and self-assured. Henry walked to the center of the hall and looked around, as if analyzing every detail of the store. "I came to know the team of my jewelry store better." The hall was absolutely silent. The flattering smiles of the employees immediately vanished. Tiffany and Liam exchanged nervous glances, and manager Ethan Monroe, who was about to approach, turned, pale as paper. "Excuse me, sir, what do you mean your jewelry store?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his composure. Henry turned to him and smiled slightly. "That's exactly what you heard. I am one of the anonymous investors in the Lavelle network. I helped found this company years ago, but I was never directly involved in the administration. I decided to visit this store unannounced to see how customers are really treated here. And I must say," he paused, looking directly at Liam and Tiffany, who gulped, "I was deeply disappointed." The silence in the hall was now almost suffocating. The employees began to remember the humble man they had treated with contempt. The penny dropped like an electric shock. Henry then turned to Noah Evans, who continued to watch the scene, still not believing what was happening. "But I also saw that there are people here who really understand what respect and empathy mean." He walked over to Noah and placed a firm hand on the young salesman's shoulder. "It was this boy who saved the reputation of this store. While the others laughed at me, he listened to me. While others humiliated me, he helped me. If there's anyone here who deserves recognition, it's him." Noah felt a warmth rise through his chest. He had never expected anything in return for what he had done for Henry, but now, in front of everyone, he received the recognition that really mattered. Manager Ethan Monroe tried to intervene. "Mr. Wallace, I assure you that..." Henry raised his hand, interrupting him with a serious look. You don't need to justify yourself, Ethan. I've seen enough." He then turned to Noah and said, "From today, you are no longer just a salesman. I want you on the management team of this store. You understand the true value of a customer, something that many here seem to have forgotten." Noah's eyes widened. A promotion? A leadership position? He could hardly believe it. Liam and Tiffany looked about to pass out, and Ethan Monroe, who had previously felt untouchable, was now visibly shaken. Henry then looked at the rest of the team and concluded, "What happened to me here was a test, and only one person passed. I hope this store learns a very valuable lesson today." And with that, Henry Wallace turned and walked out of the jewelry store, leaving behind a hall full of embarrassed employees, an emotional young salesman, and a twist that would never be forgotten. On that sunny afternoon in Beverly Hills, California, the atmosphere inside Lavelle Jewelry was completely different from the day Henry Wallace first walked in. Now everyone knew who he really was. Not just a gardener, but one of the jewelry chain's hidden investors. Silence hung in the hall, while the employees were still processing the big turnaround. Those who had once laughed and mocked the old man were now embarrassed and uneasy. Ethan Monroe, the arrogant manager, and salespeople Liam Carter and Tiffany Williams, who had ridiculed Henry, stood pale, fearing the consequences of what they had done. But Henry wasn't there for revenge. He was there to teach a life lesson. He turned his gaze to Noah Evans, the young salesman who helped him without expecting anything in return. Noah still seemed astonished by everything that had happened, not believing that the same man he had helped was one of the owners of the company. Henry cleared his throat and spoke aloud for everyone in the store to hear. "Many here judged me by my appearance. They saw me with simple clothes, calloused hands, and assumed that I didn't deserve respect. But there was one person among you who didn't let himself be carried away by appearances. A person who saw beyond what the eye can see. And that person is Noah Evans. Noah felt his face heat up when he heard his name mentioned, but he stood firm, listening carefully. When I needed it most, Noah didn't laugh at me. He didn't chase me out of the store. He heard me. He believed in me. And more than that, he made a personal sacrifice to help me. If this place needs good professionals, Noah is the best example of what it means to be a real salesperson. The other employees looked at Noah, some with admiration, others with regret. Tiffany and Liam couldn't face him, and Ethan Monroe just stared at the floor, knowing there was no excuse for his behavior. Henry then turned to Noah with a genuine smile and said, "And that's why from now on you will no longer be a simple salesman. I'm promoting you to assistant manager of this store. I want people like you leading this place and making sure no one else goes through the humiliation I went through here." Noah widened his eyes, completely surprised. "Mr. Wallace, I don't know what to say." Henry patted her on the shoulder and continued, "In addition to the promotion, I want you to receive a special bonus as recognition for your character and generosity. You proved that the world still has good people, and good people should be rewarded." Noah felt his eyes fill with tears, but he smiled, deeply grateful. He never helped Henry expecting anything in return. Everything he did was out of compassion and humanity. But now, his act of kindness had changed his life forever. Henry then looked directly at Ethan Monroe, Liam Carter, and Tiffany Williams. As for the others, he began, crossing his arms. "I know we all make mistakes. I know that everyone can learn. But in this store there is no room for discrimination, arrogance, and prejudice." He then looked at Ethan. "Ethan, your attitude as a manager was unacceptable. Not only did he allow a customer to be humiliated, but he also encouraged this type of behavior. As of today, you are fired." The manager swallowed, knowing there was no arguing. He simply grabbed his name tag, lowered his head, and walked out of the store without saying a word. Henry then turned to Tiffany and Liam, who were nervous. "And as for you two, I believe you deserve a chance to learn from your mistakes. If they stay here, I want them to go through customer service and empathy training. If I hear that they treated anyone with prejudice again, they will have the same fate as Ethan." The two nodded quickly, knowing they had no choice but to accept the lesson. Before leaving the store, Henry looked at everyone and said clearly and firmly, "Today, you learned something important. Character is worth more than appearance. Money can buy many things, but it can never buy true respect. Never judge a person by their clothes, their job, or their financial condition, because one day you may end being surprised." With that, he gave Noah one last smile and left the store. Noah stood still for a few moments, absorbing everything that happened. He had gone from a simple salesman to assistant manager, all because of an act of genuine kindness. And so, on that day, the life lesson was forever marked in the history of LUXURY Jewelry. The story of Henry Wallace and Noah Evans became a landmark at LUXURY Jewelry in Beverly Hills, California. What started as an act of prejudice and humiliation turned into an unforgettable lesson in character, empathy, and respect. By the end of that day, the employees of the jewelry store were different. The environment, previously superficial and full of judgments, now carried a weight of reflection. Liam Carter and Tiffany Williams, who had laughed at Henry on the first visit, were more reserved, processing what had happened. The former manager, Ethan Monroe, had been fired, serving as an example that arrogance and contempt for others have consequences. But the biggest impact was on Noah Evans. The young man, who had once entered the jewelry store just looking for an ordinary job, had now been promoted to assistant manager and gained invaluable recognition, not just for the position or the bonus, but for the fact that he had proven to everyone that kindness and true character are always worth it. Noah learned that small gestures can transform lives. He helped Henry without expecting anything in return, but ended up changing his own fate in the process. As Henry left the store, his lesson echoed in the minds of everyone present. Character is worth more than appearance. Never judge a person by their clothes, their job, or their financial condition, because one day, you might end up being surprised. This is a message that goes far beyond this story. It's something that applies to all of us, every day. How many times have we judged someone without knowing them? How many opportunities do we miss because we only look at the surface? Do we really value people for who they are or what they appear to be? These questions make us think. How many times could we have been like Noah, but we choose to act like Liam or Tiffany? If this story made you reflect, don't keep this lesson just for yourself. Enjoy this video if you believe that respect and empathy should be above appearances. Leave a comment below. Have you ever lived or witnessed something similar? How do you think the world would be different if more people acted like Noah? Share this story with your friends and family. The more people who hear this message, the more chances we have to make the world a more humane and respectful place. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell to receive more inspiring stories like this, and continue to reflect on how we can be better every day. Remember, a small act of kindness can change someone's life, and maybe even yours. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.